Welcome to the GTN Show. Today we are going to be discussing the controversial penalty that Hayden Wilde received at the Commonwealth Games.
Yeah, we're also going to be heading out and about and performing our own little field test as we try and replicate the gear ratio that Sam Long opted for with his crazy one-by setup at the Alpe d'Huez triathlon on some steep climbs around Bath and find out just how hard he made it for himself.
And the excitement is building ahead of the Collins Cup with new team announcements.
Yeah, plus we're going to be running through all the action from this weekend's racing. Okay, kicking off with reacts, things that we've spotted on social media this past week, and a really nice one to kick off with. Lucy Charles-Barclay is back. Yep, she is excited to announce that she feels like a triathlete again because she is swim biking and running. She's been out with injury for quite some time. In fact, the last time we saw her race was the Ironman 70.3 World Championships where she won and then unfortunately suffered from injury earlier in the year. It's taken her a long time to get back, but she is back running?
Yeah, it does. It has felt like a long time, but she's obviously had a lot of expertise. She's been over with the Red Bull team, hasn't she? And just, I think, something like that has given her time to reflect and move forwards. And it looks like she's also signed with ASICS, and yeah, they've been supporting her on that return to running, which is great to see. This next post goes a little bit deeper. This one is from Kira D'Amato, and you might have seen it if you follow quite a few triathletes being reposted. She is a USA marathon runner and recently finished 8th at the World Championships in Oregon, so a very respectable marathon runner. And it's kind of a long post, but I'll just pick the bits out. She was basically sat somewhere where a stranger came up to her and asked what she did, and she says she's a marathon runner, and they quite bluntly said, "You don't look like a marathon runner." I mean, this was after she'd finished 8th at the World Championships. So she kind of goes into a little bit of opening up this big topic of body weight and what one should look like and the effect that someone could have by saying that to younger athletes and on their nutrition and on their kind of progression in the career. And there's bits here where she says so basically, the reaction was, "You're big for a marathon runner. I want to turn this conversation off, but despite my attempts and closed off body language, he continued. He couldn't believe I ran a marathon and wanted me to agree that I must have been one of the larger runners in the field." I mean, that's quite disgusting language, really. But she goes on to say the perspective's so wrong, breaks my heart that other athletes, girls and women could be getting this terrible advice from someone in a position of trust and power. And I mean, men as well. It's a scary topic, but she just goes on, there's no ideal way, everybody is a runner's body, and I like that. She said, food is not only fuel, but also nourishment, joy, culture. Keep your mouth shut about other people's weight and body size. And she finishes up with a bit of a positive here, and just I guess a bit of a message saying, you shouldn't be going to bed hungry. If you feel lightheaded or dizzy when on run and working out, you're likely to be under-fueling. Consider talking to a registered dietitian. Don't listen to critics about your weight or size. Stick to a training routine. Your body will figure out your efficient weight. And the reason I've included that, loads of triathletes picked up on it, and it's obviously something that does come up every now and then in the triathlon world as well, and athletes do get comments. It's
an incredibly important point she's finished with there, and as you say, it has been picked up and we've seen it shared by a lot of athletes and triathletes. Well worth having a read of that post.
Yeah, definitely. Well, our next update comes from Greg White, and we talked about him a few weeks ago on the show because he was attempting this mega marathon swim down the Thames, 125 miles he was planning on swimming to break the record. Sadly, it didn't quite go to plan. He was flying the first 3 days and then his shoulders just basically gave up on him. I think he was doing 40 odd miles a day. So, I mean, this is swimming, not running.
Yeah, he had about 40 miles to go, I believe. So
he took some time to sort of, basically it was a medical decision that he couldn't carry on. So they stopped and they've gone back to the starting point. There's a post here actually from Helen Webster who's supporting, and she says, "We are going back. Greg White is all healed and heading back to the Thames on Monday." And then there's a few posts from Greg with his updates, and by the time this goes out, he might have even finished with just those 40 miles to go. But I think now that he realises he's not going for the record, he's just making the most of raising money, raising awareness for the RLSS, the Royal Life Saving Society, and the RNLI, the Royal National Lifeboat Institute, and importantly, swimming safety and awareness.
Nice. Now, this is a bit of a geeky reacts that we've spotted. It was an interesting shoe choice, and I'm going to give this one an attempt.
Go on.
Alewata Bilbao Amusan.
I think you said it with enough confidence, Mark. Go for it.
She's the 100-metre hurdle and actually world record holder for the 100-metre hurdles now. But it was the shoe choice that has really sparked a bit of interest and debate because she's, rather than wearing a short distance spike, she's actually wearing a long distance spike, a spike that is normally developed and designed for 5k, 10k runners. Not even a 1500 meter runner would opt for spikes like these. So someone running over 100 meters to opt for spikes like this is really interesting. And I guess it opens up the topic of not every shoe is perfect for one another, and actually, you know, we have to go with whatever's right for us.
I mean, that sounds like the extreme opposite to what we were talking about on the show last week with James, when there's a company that are actually designing shoes for different paces that you can then, depending on your pace, whereas this is like going completely away from that model. So, yeah, quite interesting. But maybe I would, not necessarily recommend going to buy a sprint shoe for your next triathlon, or if you don't know.
No, probably not a good idea.
We spotted this post from Lindsay Corbin, who is going for her 16th Ironman World Championship finish this Kona, but it is going to be her final one. She is announcing her retirement 10 weeks early, and it's a really nice long post. I'm not going to read it all, but basically she's saying that please come and join me in my 10-week retirement party, which I think is brilliant. She just says there's going to be lots of high fives, hugs and tears along the way, but most importantly, thank you to so many who've helped shape a career that I'm extremely proud of. Kona or bust, baby, who's with me? One last time.
Oh, I love it. Great stuff. And finally, we have to talk about this. Sam Long's gear ratio choice for the Outdoors Triathlon this past week. We'll get into the results later on. Now, the Outdoors Triathlon, a long course event, is a 2.2 kilometre swim, 118 kilometre bike and a 20 kilometre run. On the bike, they take in a total of 3,200 metres of elevation gain and obviously go up the famous Outdoors climb. But that is only actually one of 4 cols within the event. So whilst that is the biggest, they've still got 3 other pretty big ones to take in. But Sam attempted this on a 1x setup, his easiest gear being a 54 by 33. That works out a gear ratio of 1.64, which compared to a lot of people that will be doing that sort of course, isn't that easy and doesn't give him that much choice. Here's what he had to say after the event. A DNF, sadly for me today, but also history was made. I think the first time ever up outdoors with a 54.33 as my easiest gear. I was very worried about this 1x setup for the last few weeks. I did everything I could to get to different gearing and lose weight. Alas, it fell short. And basically goes on to explain how there was so much damage to his legs from having to ride that gear on the climbs that he just could not run and had to DNF. Now, obviously, we're gutted for Sam, and I've got to say, I do really respect his approach to this and just how he's just willing to try anything and sort of break away from the so-called rule book of triathlon. Yeah,
I mean, and he's honest with it. And I think, you know, we forget how young he is in the sport as well, but just because he's up there already, you know, doing these amazing performances. And it's like, he's an individual person. He can make these decisions and he can learn from them. And who are we to sit here and judge? And quite a few people have.
Well, yeah, it really did open up a can of worms on social media. I don't think we're going to get into all of those. And in fairness to Sam, he wasn't planning on doing this race when he left the US. So he did try his hardest to get a whole load of parts. And it's not as easy as you may think for these pro athletes to get parts, particularly at the moment. But what we are going to do is go out and do a little field test to see what this gear ratio is like.
Well, after close observation and some rough maths, we think that Sam's easiest gear ratio comes out at 1.64. So we want to try and replicate it, but we don't have any 1x setup just sat there ready to go. So we're having to compromise slightly and get as close as we can, which gives me a 52.32, which is a 1.63 ratio. Yeah,
then for me, my easiest gear is a 53.32, which works out at 1.66. So slightly harder, but as you say, this is pretty last minute, and I've heard there's some supply issues. Anyway, we have also had to override our synchro shift a little bit because there is going to be some serious cross-chaining going on. Sorry about that in advance. But we have found a hill with a very similar average gradient to outdoors. We are on the outskirts of Bath, and it's around 8.9%. So let's see what this is like.
Oh, well, how far we get.
Yeah, I could see why this might be hard on a 14k climb. Push. All right, now that was obviously just a bit of fun, entirely unscientific, but I've got to say, my legs are still quite tired even after a short
my
climb.
glutes on that, my goodness.
And I mean, that was one short climb. Sam had to do 118k, 4 coals. I mean, I can understand why his legs might be hurting at the end of that.
Yeah, I imagine he was probably dreading it because he must have known within reason that was gonna suffer from it, wasn't he?
Yeah, obviously all tongue in cheek. This, as I say, totally unscientific. But Sam has actually put out a post since the previous one, sort of reiterating what we said about him kind of carving his own way in triathlon, which we really respect.
Yeah.
Right, now for the Tri news. Now we will get on to the controversial Hayden Wilde penalty, but first of all, we've got some PTO news. Now we've got the Collins Cup coming around very fast. That's taking place on the 20th of August in Slovakia over that 100k distance. Team Europe versus Team USA versus Team International. Now the athletes are being selected and qualifying for these teams as we speak. Now the automatic qualifiers have already been announced. We've got 4 male and 4 female for each of those teams, and that basically is based on the top 4 ranked athletes in the PTO World Rankings for each country. So, Team Europe is Daniela Rief, Anne Haug, Laura Philipp, Kat Matthews, Christian Blumenfeld, Gustav Eden, Patrick Langer, and Magnus Ditlev. What's a team?
It's a strong one.
Strong start.
We might start to see where the money is because with Team US follow that with the selection of Taylor Knibb, Sky Munch, Chelsea Sodaro, Jackie Herring, and then the men's side, Matt Hansen, Sam Long, Rudy Von Berg, and Chris Leiferman. Also
a very strong team. And then Team International, we have Paula Finlay, Ashley Gentle, Tamara Jewett, Ellie Salthouse, and on the men's side, we've got Lionel Sanders, Braden Curry, Max Newman, and Jackson Laundry.
Well, it is a big deal because obviously you are racing for your team glory, but beyond that, there's a whopping $1.5 million prize purse. So there's a lot to play for, and you'll see that the athletes are already tailoring their calendars for it. It's not just like a bit of a fun event. There's something more to it than that. So the wildcard options are all to play for at the moment, and the announcement's actually coming out. So there's 2 more male and female athletes to add to each of those teams, but they are selected by the captains.
Yeah, now we actually do already have the Team US captains picks, but we're waiting some of the others. So, Team US, we have Sophie Watts, Sarah True, Jason West, and Ben Canute. But we're going to have to stay tuned for the other teams.
Well, in other news, the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, have just announced that they have added 4 new athletes to the advisory board, including Alistair Brownlee. Now, we know he was campaigning for that back in Tokyo and missed that opportunity back then, but they've just announced that alongside the likes of Alison Felix, there's 2 other athletes as well have become part of this. It'll be a 4-year term. I mean, Alistair's already had experience on the European Olympic Committee board. He also sits on the PTO Athletes Advisory Board. So he's certainly starting to, I think, put his fingers into pies beyond being an athlete, but it's also great to see that, you know, he's obviously got such a wealth of experience in both ITU racing and in now long distance racing and a huge network that he's putting some of that knowledge back into the sport. And his quote here just says that I'm a product of the Olympic movement. Watching the first ever Olympic triathlon in Sydney inspired me to dream and work hard towards those dreams. It will be a privilege to represent the athletes of the Olympic movement and play a small part in helping to realise the dreams of more young people. So congratulations, Alistair, and yeah, great that triathlon is being represented at the IOC level as well.
He's a busy man, Alistair, isn't he?
I know.
Talking of busy people, Lee Spencer, who is nicknamed the Rowing Marine, is a Marine in Great Britain, is taking on an almighty adventure at the moment. It is the Triathlon of Great Britain. So he's swimming, or has already swum, the Channel, 22 miles, and is currently undertaking just over 1,000-mile cycle from from Land's End to John O'Groats, and also hiking 45 miles as he goes up the 3 peaks within Great Britain.
Yeah, it's quite incredible. And he is an above-knee single-leg amputee and doing this to raise money for the Royal Marines charity and also just raising awareness of what people can do with a disability. So, yeah, good luck to Lee. We're not quite sure where you'll be in your progress by the time the show comes out, but fingers crossed you'll be getting near to the finish.
Right, and now for the race news. And now, for some parts of the world, this event has quite possibly slipped by unnoticed, but the Commonwealth Games is a big deal over here, and it provided for a very exciting spectacle. Now, similarly to the Olympic Games, the Commonwealth Games takes place every 4 years. This year, it took place in Birmingham in the UK. Now, the first events for triathlon were the men's and women's individual events, took place on Friday last week and over a sprint distance format. So we had some really fierce racing. Now, last minute withdrawal from Henry Schoon meant we didn't have the usual swimming powerhouse up front, but Hayden Wilde, Taylor Reid and Jamie Riddle from South Africa stepped up to the mark. They had a small gap over the chasing field, and that's quite significant because Wilde kind of needs that gap over the likes of Alex Yee, who was in that chase pack. The gap yo-yoed on the bike and they came off around a 16-second gap in T2. Wilde quickly took off, but Alex Yee was chipping away at his advantage throughout the whole run. It actually looked like he might run out of road, but he managed to get up alongside him just before they hit the blue carpet. However, this is where things get exciting because suddenly we hear that Wilde has a penalty for a helmet infringement, and that meant that he had to take that penalty, a 10-second stop and go penalty just before the finish line. So as they approached the blue carpet, Wilde, very sportsmanly, gave Alex a little low five and he carried on to take the win. Wilde pulled off, took his 10 seconds, then took second, and then in third, Matthew Hauser crossed the line. So, what do we think to Wilde getting this penalty?
I mean, it's interesting because straight away people could say, well, you know, Alex was be a quicker runner and would have won anyway, but it's not as simple as just those 10 seconds and looking at the results. So, I mean, back to the penalty itself, there's so many different angles, but I feel like Hayden Wilde, as an Olympic bronze medalist, is not going to submit a protest. But you know, the team did during the race, but now he's sort of had time to settle down and say that if he wasn't sure that he hadn't done anything wrong. Yeah.
So essentially, for those that haven't seen it, the infringement is apparently that Hayden unclipped his helmet before racking his bike. Now, from what it looks like, I mean, it's close. I mean, he is clearly holding onto the helmet strap as the bike racks. Whether he unclips before or not is really debated. I mean, it's close. You're getting it's nitpicking, really, isn't it?
And it doesn't look good that, you know, in a sense, it's given the advantage to an English athlete at an England-hosted event, which doesn't sit too well. And I mean, Hayden's been very sportsmanlike in his post since and said, obviously, congratulations to Alex and an incredible performance, but saying how it would have changed his tactics, which, you know, totally true. And basically hoping to get an equal gold medal. So they have, I think, 30 days for this to be rectified or to be solved.
Yeah. So, I mean, as he said, I mean, once he found out he had the penalty, it definitely affected him mentally whilst he was racing. So who knows whether he may have held off Alex a little bit further. But nonetheless, I mean, we were robbed of an epic sprint finish.
Well, yeah, as spectators, from a selfish point of view, that's very true. So we will let you know if anything does change or if he does get upgraded to a gold, but that is the results as they stand. The women's race was less controversial and more clear-cut, although it did have an interesting, exciting start. The swim was actually led out by Beth Potter, so, you know, known for her very strong running. I think people were thinking, my goodness, and that did make for a breakaway of 5 athletes at the start of the bike, including Flora Duffy and Georgia Taylor-Brown, Sophie Caldwell, and an athlete, Emmy Legault from Canada. But obviously in that, you've got 2 of the major favourites, and the race did soon start to pan out as we expected, and Flora, with her aggressive cycling, made a break, and Georgia Taylor-Brown went with her. They managed to work together. So with those 2 phenomenal runners coming into T2 in the lead, it was going to be a foot race between them. And I think, I don't know, watching, I was surprised to see Flora make such an inroad into Georgia Taylor-Brown so early on.
I think we all were. It just seemed like Georgia maybe was a little bit off pace on the day.
I haven't heard if she said anything about that.
She hasn't, but
yeah, so I mean, an incredible performance by Flora, the defending Commonwealth champion from 2018 and obviously Olympic champion, just backing up another incredible win. Georgia Taylor-Brown taking second, and third place went to Beth Potter with a really strong run. It was Sophie Caldwell just finishing in 4th.
Yeah, we also had the mixed team relay, which is such an exciting format. I mean, I've had friends who don't even follow triathlon talking to me about the mixed team relay. It's a dominant performance from Team England after a very impressive first leg from Alex Yee that saw him putting in a massive time on advantage between himself and the chasers, including Hayden Wilde. But it was the race for silver that got incredibly hot. It was an impressive final leg from non-Stanford that saw Wales taking silver ahead of Team Australia and New Zealand in 4th.
Yeah, it's always an exciting event, isn't it? And great to see. The orders change now as well. So you might be watching that thinking, oh, it's different to the Olympics. They're apparently changing that every 4 years. But it wasn't the only racing. We also had a couple of categories for the para triathlon, including the PTVI high class. And it was great to see Dave Ellis with his partner coming out on top. Now, they were the favourites going into Tokyo, and he had some major malfunction with the bike and didn't manage to get on the podium where he was expected. So, yeah, great. And second place went to Sam Harding and his partner from Australia, and it was Jonathan Gorlick of Australia who was third.
Yeah, and it's a double win for England, actually, in the PTVI class, because Katie Crowhurst took the win on the women's side after an incredible run performance, saw her taking the win by over 4 minutes, with Chloe McComb taking second and Jessica Tumala in third.
We mentioned earlier we also had the Alpe d'Huez Triathlon, and it's part of a festival, but the big race that attracts those big name pros is the long distance event. And I mean, the likes of Sam Long obviously came over from the USA, but it was Leon Chevaliers who actually stole the show on this race. Just to remind you of the distances: 2.2k swim, 118k bike with 3,200 metres of climbing, and then a finish off with a 20k run. Now, Leon actually biked under 4 hours. The only athlete to do so with a 3-hour 52. And to give a perspective, Sam, admittedly, with his gear ratio, was over 4 hours. So that just shows an impressive performance. And he ran a 1 hour 15 off that. So he took the win by 18 minutes in a time of 5:41. Second place was Simon Vian in a 5:59. And then third place, Alberto Marino Mollins, over 6 hours in 6:01. The women's race was won convincingly by Barbara Riveros in a time of 6:35 over 8 minutes, ahead of second place Svenja Toes, and third went to Alexandra Tondeur.
Yeah, now for a slightly obscure event, the Edeka UK. Now, this event actually happened a couple of weeks ago. We missed it at the time, but this is a pretty epic event, so we've got to talk about it. Now, as the event suggests, or the name of the event suggests, it is 10 iron distance triathlons. Now, you can do it as a continuous event, so essentially the distance of 10 iron distance triathlons in one go, or one every day for 10 days. Now, the continuous was won by Ger Prendergast by about 4 hours over second place in a time of 227 hours, 15 minutes and 27 seconds.
Days is that?
I don't even want to do the maths on that. And then the 1x10 decker was won by James Simpson in a time of 145 hours, 51 minutes and 47 minutes. Now, actually a big shout out to James, because I've been in touch with him. He's raised over £13,000 for charity to support, promote and develop young people outdoor activities in Alfreton, which is a town in Derbyshire in the UK. Now, I was looking at his times. He did the first one in 8 hours, 1 minute.
Oh my goodness.
Hang on. And then the rest are between 14 to 16 hours. What happened was the first one took place on a ridiculously hot day, so the organisers decided to cut the distances down, because, yeah, I was pretty impressed by that. They cut the distances down on that first one, then added it to all the subsequent days.
Oh, right. Oh, that's hard, isn't it? Mentally, it's tough to do.
Very tough. Now, James actually said that he burnt around 6,000 calories per day, which is pretty impressive. So he said it was as much a battle of eating. Yeah,
imagine how many gels you'd have to do. I think you're beyond gels.
He said he struggled with night sweats. He, even because of being slightly delusional, he did an extra run lap one day, went the wrong way on the bike, which, considering you are literally doing the same bike loop over and over again, that's, you know, that would be normally quite hard going, but that's just the state of mind he was in. Plus, lack of sleep, saddle sores, foot pain, as you would normally expect. But I'm just so impressed by the people that do these, but also, you know, James raising so much money for a charity. So we'll pop the link for his Just Giving page in the description down below.
It's now time to look at your photos, or in this case, this week, we are looking at your videos. You guys have been getting a bit creative and sending some clips of you in action, which is wonderful. And remember, if you've got photos or videos that you want to share with us, you can do that using the uploader, which is on screen, also in the description below. And this first video comes in from Andy, and it's the Cleveland Stillman middle distance triathlon. He says he's doing his second middle distance, no rain forecast, but it lashed it down for a chunk of the bike leg, and the run was rather off-road with lots of standing water, potholes, gravel, grass and overgrowth, but happy to come in 10th overall, 7th in my age group. I mean, that sounds very British, doesn't it?
Nice, yeah, that does, yeah. Never trust the weather forecast. Next one from Berry in Bali. I participated in the Ocean Man 5K. I got panic attack, strayed off course and cramped on one of my calves, but I finished in the middle of my age group and I felt like I could do another round, almost. It was nice not to have to cycle and run after the swim. And finally, we have the Caption Competition. Last week's photo was from Edmonton. This photo here. We had some good captions coming in. Firstly, from Atinan, trying to splash the water to cool down, but it missed.
Nice. We have Rasul Pahamat with this one. When you beat the heat with a splash to win some cash.
Nice. David Blitzer, don't drink the water where you are, drink it where you're going to be.
I mean, yeah, random, but we like it. But the winner this week of the GTN bottle is Anthony Featherstone. I went for a drink, but bottled it.
Hey.
Well, congratulations, Anthony. We will get in touch with us and we will send you a GTN bottle.
Yeah, the GTN bottle, not that bottle. Now for this week's Caption Comp photo, it is from the Commonwealth Games. It is Taylor Reid doing a little dance. I think he's actually just undoing his tri-suit. I'm going to say head, shoulders, reed and toes.
Well, I like that one, Mark, but if you guys think you can do better than that, I'm sure you can. Yeah, we've got faith in you. Do leave your caption suggestions in the comments section below.
Yeah, well, that is it for the show this week. We've got lots coming up on the channel, including what burns more calories, swim, bike or run?
I don't even know. Intriguing. Well, if you have enjoyed this show, give us a like and remember, click on that globe so you don't miss any more of our videos. And if you are intrigued to know what professional triathlete Sarah Crowley eats, well, there's a video for you just here.